Alright, hello again, this is Jeff Scott. I've been going over the PowerPoints for our Murox MySQL 2nd edition book for the 152-147 Relational Database Development class for the spring 2016 semester at Blackhawk Technical College. And as you can see right now, we're up to Chapter 13, which is on language skills for writing stored programs. Alright, so we're going to go over that right now. So, what do we want in here? Write a script that creates and calls a stored procedure that can be used to test MySQL's language features. Use MySQL to write procedural code that uses, for example, if statements, case statements, loops, cursors, and condition handlers. Distinguish between stored procedures, stored functions, triggers, and events. Distinguish between using an if, a case, a few of these other things that are in here, such as while, repeat, declare cursor, declare handler. Describe how a loop can be used to work with a cursor. Distinguish between a simple case statement and a search case. Distinguish between a continue handler and an exit handler. So these are the things that we want to be talking about. Alright, so first, stored procedures and stored functions. A stored procedure can be called from an application that has access to a database. A stored function can be called from an SQL statement, just like the functions provided by MySQL. You can also customize stored functions so that they perform tasks that are specific to your database. Alright. Triggers. Triggers and events don't need to be called. They're executed automatically. A trigger executes when either an insert, update, or delete statement is run against a specific table, and an event executes at some scheduled time. So let's take a look at an example script here. So what do we have? Alright, we're telling it to use our accounts payable database. We're saying if the procedure test exists, drop it so we can restart. This is a comment. Alright, so the minus minus is a comment. And then notice we've got here delimiter slash slash. That is turning something on. That is turning it back off, just so you know. Alright, so what we want to be able to do is we want to be able to take and use this procedure as though it was a command. And what I mean is we want to be able to do multiple things with this. And the reason that this is important, that what I'm telling you is important, is if we left that slash slash off, when the system saw the semicolon at the end of the line, it would think, oh, well, then I'm done with this particular thing that I'm working with. But now what we're telling it is our delimiter, instead of using a delimiter of a semicolon, now our delimiter will end up being slash slash. Okay? So then we've got end slash slash. So that means I'm all done. That's the only slash slash that you see in here other than the one that declares it. This says take the delimiter and send it back again, so it's now the semicolon. So what this call test means is run this entire program. So what does this program do? Alright, it's a procedure. So in this language, it's called test, and it has no, as you can see, it has no parameters. It starts here at the begin, it ends here at the end. So we're declaring a local variable in here called SumBalanceDo var. It's a decimal of 92, which again means that the biggest value it can hold is $9,999,999.99. Alright, then we're saying give the sum of the invoice total minus the payment total minus the credit total. So give me the sum of all that. Put that into this variable that we just created, but only do it from the invoice where the vendor ID is 95. Then, if the balance due is greater than 0, all right, then put down balance due and to show us what it is. Otherwise, if it's not greater than 0, it means either they paid everything or maybe they even have a credit coming. But either way, we say balance paid in full. So in this case, in the example, we're calling it message, and for this customer, for customer 95, their balance is paid in full. Now what you'll see as we go a little further into this is, in an ideal world, you won't be hard coding that value in there. You'll be able to pass that value in. So you can run this on different customers. So here are some of the statements that you can use in here. Notice it's if, else, if, and else if is put in there as one word. Case, and the cases, instead of being switch with cases, it's case, and it's got whens in there for each one of the cases, and the default is now called else. We've got while something, while do loop, repeat until, repeat. So it's the same kind of stuff we've been working with previously. It's just that syntactically it's a little bit different. All right. Now, you'll notice we've got a thing there that says declare cursor for in here. And what that does is that defines a result set that you can process with a loop. The cursor, literally, typically you set it at the beginning of the records that are returned, and then you put it inside of a loop so you can go and work with each record, one record at a time. The last one, the declare handler, defines some kind of a handler that's executed when an error is encountered. The select that's in there returns the result set to the calling program or retrieves data from a database and stores it so it can be used by the program. So you see how simple this is right here. Whoops. Let's see. I don't know why this has been acting funky like, but let me see if I can grab all this code that's here. All right, so I'm going to try to, I'm going to try to grab this code that's right here, copy it to the clipboard, come back into here, paste it in, see if I can run it. All right, so what I've done is I turned off my delimiter, okay, and I've created a new procedure called test, which should just print out on the screen, this is a test. So, I don't remember if we say exec test or just test. Yeah. Okay, now I've gone and done it. Okay, well, that screwed that up. Bring it back up again. Let's try to paste that in again. Okay, fine. Use work. Now paste this in. It says test already exists. How about exec test? Okay, it didn't like that either. I thought that was how he executed it. But for whatever reason, it didn't like what we were working on. So, wow. All right, let's go back to the chapter. Okay, so it says the response from the system when we put all this in should be this. And as you could see, very well see, it was not. All right, when we tried doing that. I'm trying to figure out why that would be the case. Let's drop procedure test. let's see if we can paste it in again. Okay. We created the procedure, and I don't remember, like I said, how to call it, so we'll have to figure that out so we can hopefully go a little bit further with this. Okay. The syntax for declaring a variable: declare, followed by the name of the variable, followed by the type of the variable, and we can give it a default if we want to. All right. We can also set a variable. So let's look at this example. Here's an example here that uses variables. All right. So you'll notice it's on two different lines, or two different pages. So again, the first thing we're doing in here with that delimiter is we're turning off the meaning of the semicolon. So the semicolon no longer ends statements. Okay, it'll end the current statement, but what it'll allow us to hold test is one big unit of information. All right, so we're creating this procedure called test. We're declaring 5 variables. You can see that the first 3 are of type decimal, and the last 2 are of type integer. We're setting the vendor ID to 95. Okay? Then we're looking for the biggest, the smallest, and the count for customer 95. We're taking the max and putting the max invoice total, and we're putting that into max invoice total. We're taking the min invoice total and putting it into the variable min underscore invoice total, and the count invoice ID, we're putting it into the variable count underscore invoice underscore ID for vendor ID 95. All right. Then we're, as it says, we're setting the percent of the difference. So we're doing a calculation here. All right. And then we are, the idea is that we're doing this: the biggest invoice, the smallest invoice, the difference between those invoices, and how many invoices total the customer had. All right. All right. If, notice with the if, it doesn't have to be inside of parentheses, but it still is a Boolean expression. And after the word if you've got your expression, then you need the word then. You can have as many expressions after that as you want to. You don't have to have an else if, you don't have to have an else. It says you can code parentheses around this, but you don't have to. So if the first invoice due date here is less than the current date, they've got outstanding invoices overdue. All right. Otherwise, if it's today's date, they're due today. Otherwise, there are no overdue invoices. Okay. If we look at the case, you'll notice the way that this is set up. This is the equivalent of saying switch followed by an expression in other languages, and these are all then cases, and that would be the default. But other than that, it's used pretty similarly, except but when you say when, you've got an expression and it's then, and you can put one or more statements in there, and you'll notice that there is no need for a break in here. We saw an example of this earlier that would say what the terms were, and it would be between due 10 days from now and more than 30 days from now, type of an idea. You can also have what's called a searched case statement. And again, I should have my book open at all times and be looking at this with you. You can use a search case statement to execute one or more statements depending on one or more Boolean expressions. It works similarly to an if. You can set up while loops. You notice this looks similar to a regular while loop, except you've got the word do there, and after the end while you need a semicolon. Here is an example, kind of a silly example, but just so you see it. Here's a repeat. So again, the repeat until and the while do are similar to the while and the do while that we've used in other programming languages. This simple loop that's in here, there really isn't an exact alternative to this. Okay, so notice we give it a name. It's called test loop. We tell it to do a bunch of stuff. Then we say if it meets a certain condition, leave it, get out. All right, this is kind of like using a break statement. All right, cursors, I mentioned to you before that when you are working with a cursor, the idea is a cursor is kind of a pointer to the beginning of your result set. So it's a pointer to whatever results are going to be returned, all right, from the system. And typically when you've got a cursor, what ends up happening is you end up iterating your way through this result set in some kind of loop. And there's shown an example right there. Again, it's not my goal in here. It's been a while since I've looked at any of this stuff. It's my goal to mention this to you. If you want to go over it, you want some more that's in it, you'll have to do that on your own. Okay? All right. When you try to do these different operations, different errors can occur. So you can see some of those errors that can occur right here. And you'll notice that you've got different error codes, and based on the error code you get different error states that come up. Well, you can check in your actual code that you're writing for certain error codes, and if they happen, you can take the appropriate action, such as something not being found, some kind of an SQL exception where you're doing something as opposed to the norm, and if you want to be really picky, you can even go all the way to just checking for warnings. A handler, we talked about this a little bit more. Typically a handler is going to be something that you want to have occur at a certain time. In some ways, this is equivalent in a lot of, for example, in Linux, you can set up things that run with what's called a daemon. Some call it a daemon, but I think it's a daemon, which is a scheduler. So in other words, if I want something to happen at 3 o'clock every day, maybe 3 a.m. every day, because I know there's not a lot of action on the machine, I can schedule it for that time. This is a similar type of an operation. With the condition, I guess I jumped ahead a little, because with the condition handler, what this is saying is, if I've got this error, what do I want to do? So declare a condition handler. So if this kind of error comes up, this is what I want to have happen. If that kind of error comes up, this is what I want to have happen, etc. So if you don't handle the error yourself, all right, typically, as it says right there, the system will take over, as it does in other languages, and what will happen is the program will just stop. You can have a continue handler, which basically you said, yeah, I know that there's going to be an error, but just keep going anyway. And you can have an exit handler, which allows you to exit gracefully from the system. Okay, and there's not too much more in this chapter, I don't believe. No, that's it. So I know I didn't go over too much. This is very short. I probably only spent, 10 or 15 minutes maximum on this. The idea was to, I guess 20 minutes, but the idea was just to introduce you to some of the stuff that's in here. What you see when you take a look in here is you're writing almost regular procedural code that you've learned in other languages. All right. The syntax is different, but what we're doing is very similar, whether you are using a database language like MySQL or whether you're using a programming language. That's pretty much it. I don't want to save, but I am going to jump up here. Come on. And, well, that's interesting. I don't want that. What I do want to do, and I'll have to do this right now. I don't like doing this, but I'm going to anyway. All right. In the next chapter, so in the next part of this, I'm going to go over transactions and locking. Very short chapter. Then we're going to go, I wish they would have changed the order of these around, how to create stored procedures and functions. And then we'll go over triggers and events. Okay? Then we'll have left the 3 chapters for database administration. So I'll be back shortly with Chapter 14 on transactions and locking.